Okay, so for today, what I'm going to show you to do is how to draw your cast shadows on your watercolor still life. So you should have all your pots, your plants, and the edges of your paper drawn. Now, some of the things that I kind of added to the paper that you might not have seen on the other videos, that I added some like kind of bends. I didn't want my paper to look too straight. I wanted it to look like kind of a little crumpled up, so I added a little extra wave and a little curl on the corner that I have showing in my still life. So one of the things you're going to notice on this video is that the video, kind of the recording skips a little bit, so you'll see it kind of jump around a little bit. That's just, I had a bad recording day. So what we're going to do, if you guys look at your still life in front of you, and I'm going to show you on my photograph, is that I have your cast shadows outlined, at least the main ones outlined with the white color pencil on your construction paper. So you can use that as a guide for when you are doing your drawing of those cast shadows. So that should hopefully help you see them a little bit better. Some of the mistakes that I see some kids make on their cast shadows a lot of times, some of the common mistakes is that they draw their cast shadows way too high. In fact, they make the cast shadows a lot of times taller than the object themselves. So one of the things that I want you to notice is just how flat they are and how high they don't go, okay? So how low they are. And also, too, take a look at the angle that your cast shadows have. They do follow the angle that the edges of your pots have, or the horizontal angles for the lines. So if you guys take a look at that, just again, I think it's important before you draw anything is to take some time to study what it is that you're actually drawing before you start drawing it. So you can kind of get an idea of the relationship between all the parts. But, you know, look at the angle of the cast shadow and how it relates to the horizontal lines of your pots. Look at the height of the cast shadows. Look at the length of them. I think you're going to be very surprised at what you see if you just take a few minutes to take a look at them before you actually draw them. So some other things too that you'll notice is that if you're like me, you might have some cast shadows that actually kind of go up and on to other pots. That's the case with mine, with that pot there over on the right. So first thing we got to do, and I'm going to start again, I always start with that first pot and plant that's in the front. I would advise you guys to do the same thing. I think it's great to start with that one that's in the front first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark where I see the cast shadow sort of hide behind the pot. So I'm making a mark over here on the very far right side of my front plant and pot. And then I'm going to make a mark at the bottom of it where I see that cast shadow start. So I need to know, before I can draw it, I need to know where it needs to start and where it needs to finish. And I'm going to zoom in with the camera so you can see this a little bit better and closer. So now that I know where the cast shadow starts and ends, I can start to do the drawing. Now this particular cast shadow is so long that it actually goes on to my plant and pot here over on the far right. So I know that it needs to go that far, and then it even goes past that one too. So I'll draw it like the way that I see it. So the next thing is, now that I know where it starts, where it ends, and how far or how long or wide it's going to be, I can go ahead and start doing this drawing. Now, when I start this drawing, I'm going to do this very, very lightly. And as you guys can see, I still have my guidelines on my drawing from when I did the pots. So I'm going to use those to help me act as a guide for the direction and angle I need on these cast shadows. I'm just going to start drawing this in very lightly. Again, I'm counting on the fact that when I draw this the first time, it's going to be wrong. I will, once I get something on the paper, I will fix it, adjust it, tweak it, but I need to get something on the paper first so I know what I need to fix. So, hardest part is just starting. So, one of the things that I think is important to recognize with the cast shadows also too is that the cast shadow basically is sort of a wacky version of the object that it's coming from. So you're going to see characteristics of the object that's creating the cast shadow, but it's not going to be an exact duplicate. So if you're a little off, it's still going to be very convincing. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself to make this as perfect as you think that you had to do, like with the pot and the plant itself. Those are actual objects, so it's a little bit of a different story with that. But with the cast shadows, those cast shadows are sort of skewed, they're stretched. The proportions are not the same as the actual object that is being casted from, so you have a little bit more leeway with that. With that being said, it doesn't mean that you should take this very lightly and kind of rush through this. You definitely want to take your time. And again, use that white color pencil outline that you see on the actual construction paper as a guide for what you need to do. So I'm just going to keep adding and working on this first cast shadow. Again, you can see that I'm already making some corrections. That should be natural. Again, if you're not erasing and redrawing things, then I would be concerned about your drawing. Again, don't look at that act of erasing your drawing as a bad sign. I think that's a good sign because that means that you're seeing things that need to be fixed and improved, and you're doing it. So that's a good sign. So I'm going to kind of work on this back edge because it's the shorter edge. There's not as much going on, so I'm going to start with the simpler edge first. And then I notice that cast shadow, again, crawls up the left side of that very far right planter that I have. And the cast shadow, again, isn't exactly lined up, so I'm going to kind of draw what I see. And then after I get that drawn in, then I'm going to draw what goes past that pot. And again, you do whatever feels natural for you. And again, the goal here is just to get something down on the paper first, and then you can play with it later. So I've got it pretty much like completed. Now what I'm going to do is just go through and fix it up. Again, I'm using a regular pencil and I'm drawing a bit heavy just so that it shows up on the video really well. You guys should be using your 4H pencil and should be drawing very, very lightly because you do not want to create indentations in your watercolor paper, because if you do, your watercolor paint, when you get to it, will settle in those indentations and look like dark outlines, and there's nothing you can really do to fix those once you've indented the paper. So make sure that you're drawing very, very lightly on top of the paper. I'm just going through and just kind of erasing, again, some of the areas that were drawn prior to this. I shouldn't see through this pot, so I went ahead and erased like that back paper line that I was showing through the pot. I got rid of that because now I need to start drawing that cast shadow up the side of the pot. And again, right here, the cast shadow is bending around the corner, so I want to make it look like it's bending. So I'm curving that line to give that impression. And again, please notice that, since this video started, I have not stopped drawing. And I'm constantly, if I'm not drawing, then I'm fixing. So you should be doing the same thing. So I'm just going through. I'm going to start erasing, again, some of those lines that are going through the pots that I should not see, just so kind of helps me with everything else. You definitely want to make sure that before we start painting that we do have all of these guidelines erased, and any line that's showing through an opaque object should be erased before we start the watercolor painting. So now I'm going to go ahead and draw the cast shadow for my planter that's over on the far right side. That's actually goes past the edge of the construction paper, but we're not going to continue our cast shadows past the edge of the paper. So our paper will kind of look like it's floating in space. So again, just make sure that all your cast shadows end at the edge of the paper, at the paper's edge. So there's not much to this one, so it's not going to take me too long to draw it, but as you can see, I'm already redrawing it, fixing it. Now, some of you guys will see multiple cast shadows, so you may not just have one cast shadow. You may have 2 or 3 cast shadows showing off of each one of your planters, plants, and pots. That will be the case for the tables that are in the middle of the classroom. So tables like 2, 5, and 6, you guys are probably going to be seeing multiple cast shadows for sure. For those of you that are on the other tables, like table 1, table 3, 4, and 7, you guys still might see some duplicate or multiple cast shadows, but maybe not as much as those middle tables. So I am going to include all the cast shadows that I see. And you'll notice that where cast shadows overlap, they create even darker shadows. And we'll talk a little bit more about how the shadows look and how to paint them in when we start with the paint. But one of the things that you will notice and how you'll start looking at cast shadows that they're like transparent layers of color. So when you have 2 cast shadows that overlap in an area, you have more layers to that particular area, therefore it looks darker. So a lot of times where they overlap, you create new shapes. So that's what I'm kind of looking at, is I'm looking at the shape that's created where those 2 cast shadows are overlapping. And again, I'm using that information to help me with the drawing. Again, make sure that when you guys do these cast shadows that you're not putting them too high. Again, I think that's kind of a natural instinct for a lot of people to just angle their cast shadows too high. So do whatever you got to do. Just keep yourself in check. Make sure that those cast shadows aren't getting too high and they have the correct angle that they need. So for this, for my planter and pot that's on the far left side of my still life, a good part of that cast shadow is blocked off. I can't see it because of the plant that's in the front. So I'm going to draw what I see. I do see a good bit of it, though, still going off, even off to the left of that front plant and pot that I have. So I'm just going through, fixing, erasing. Again, hopefully by now you've kind of recognized that, when I start doing these drawings, I go right into, I study my still life. I think about it. I compare and contrast how things relate to each other. I'm looking at how things are aligned to each other. I'm looking at how the size of one thing compares to another. So it's a lot of comparing and contrasting. Once I get through that sort of initial analysis of what I'm drawing, then I spend a good bit of time I just go straight into the drawing and I don't stop. So I draw, I fix, I draw, I fix, I draw, I fix. So that's pretty much the process. So now what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm going to go ahead and erase those rule of third lines that we started. The very first thing that we drew on the paper, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. I do not need those anymore since my drawing is pretty much done. Everything's where it needs to be, and I have my focal point on a PowerPoint. So now I'm just going to kind of go through and just revisit my cast shadows, making sure that I've got everything in a good place, revamping stuff, adding more details. I've got some more overlapping here. I've got another shape that I missed initially, so I'm going to go in and add that in. So just adding more information and more detail here. Again, the cast shadows is basically, sort of this warped version of the object that it's coming from. So you could be a little off and still make it look pretty accurate. which is nice about the cast shadows. I think the biggest thing is just getting the angle of them right and the size of them right. Just going through, just again, fixing and revising. Again, that's pretty much my process. Draw a little bit, fix a little bit. Draw, fix, draw, fix. Just kind of finishing up things down here at the bottom. Now again, I'm going through and I'm darkening my lines just so that way they're easier to see on the video. You guys should be keeping your lines nice and light. So I'm just about finished here. I'm just going to, again, keep going through and erasing some of these old guidelines. Now that my cast shadows are on, I do not need those guidelines anymore. There's nothing new for me to draw anymore. So I'm going to spend a good bit of the remaining part of my time just erasing, cleaning up. And as you guys can see, and this is a good rule or a good sort of example of what not to do, you guys can see, because I was drawing really dark with my lines, those lines that I'm trying to erase, they're not going away. So again, this is another good reason why you should be drawing very lightly on your paper. So always draw light, so that way it's easy to get rid of those lines later. So I'm about finished here, so I'm going to give you guys the rest of the time to finish up your cast shadows and erase all your old guidelines.